All right, I think we're good to go. So digital transformation, automation lessons from the trenches. Let me give a good, quick caveat, and then let's get into it. The views that I'm expressing are of my own and not of my employer. So a recent McKinsey study talked about a massive opportunity to automate knowledge working tasks. It's the size of $7 trillion. And if we want to understand the opportunity, we have to think about what happened in the past. And the way to look into that is basically ask the question, do we live in the worst of times? So if you listen to the talking heads on TV, you get all sorts of bad news every single day. Even the mood of fish get a breaking news alert. But if you flip the question and you basically ask, do we live in the best of times? One stat after another shows that the human quality of life has vastly improved. From from literacy to life expectancy to child mortality rates. And this is significant, not just a few percent points, material double-digit growth over the last 50, 60 years. And this is as a result of a series of revolutions, and it started with the printing press. And if you look at these revolutions, you can look at it in the frame of economics. These revolutions brought the cost of something down. And what the printing press did, it brought the cost of publishing books down. And so we went from an oral to a literate culture, and it sparked the European Renaissance. And then came the Industrial Revolution. And with textile mills, the cost of textiles came down. And then came the steam engine, and the cost of transportation came down. And then came heavy engineering that led to big infrastructure projects, steamships, and that brought the cost of trade down. And then we had heavy industry. And this basically ushered in the era of mass production, and this brought the cost of goods down. And finally, we have the computer revolution. And if you look at it from the perspective of cost again, computers brought the cost of arithmetic down. So you no longer needed people to calculate where a cannonball would fall. You could actually have a computer do it. And this basically led to the software revolution, where we had about 20-odd unicorns, or $1 billion startups, in the first half of this decade. But subsequently, what you see is we've accelerated the pace of change. We've had over 200 unicorns over the last 5 years. And that number is just increasing. And so this is a concept that Mark Anderson calls software eating the world. And now, if you connect this software with the AI revolution, these are two revolutions that are happening concurrently, unlike the prior revolutions. But there's a lot more that's happening. You've got robotics, biotech, blockchain, 3D printing, quantum computing, solar energy. And that's the time we live in. Everything happened concurrently. So let's talk a bit about trends, and then we'll kind of get into how we can take advantage of all of this. So if something gets 10 times cheaper, it will get adopted. So here's an example of a hard drive from IBM in the 1950s. This is a 5 megabyte hard drive. Now, 32 gigabytes, size of my thumb. This is a phone from the 90s, and this is what we now carry in our pockets every day. Here's another example of a LiDAR. LiDAR is what enables the driverless aspect of a driverless car. Now, initially, this cost $75,000 to make. So if you're the inventor working at a car company, and you go to the CFO, and your average car cost is $25,000, and you tell the CFO, hey, let's add on $75,000 and let's sell the car for $100,000. He'd laugh you out of the room. But the interesting thing is that would be one of the most short-sighted decisions that the CFO could make, because the cost of a LiDAR today is $500. And this is just in a matter of a few years. So the cost significantly comes down, and it will get adopted. The other interesting trend is that in just less than 10 years, right? Or actually 10 years ago, we had just one identity. We had a physical identity, and that was it. Ever since, just in 10 years, we now have a digital identity. And that's part of why you see all of the turmoil that's around us. We are suddenly dealing with the two identities. And this is also connected to another trend around power structures. So if you think about the 6,000 years of human recorded history, communication always happened in a broadcast mechanism, whether it was the speed of the horse, a book, radio, or TV. With the internet, right? All of those power structures are being broken because we now own communication. So if you think about, emperors, kings, dictators, generals, that top-down power structure, CEOs, popes, all of that is breaking down as we speak because we now own communication. And the other interesting thing is that as we adopt technologies, problem spaces shift. So when the camera was first invented, the problem was, hey, should I take this picture? Now it becomes a filtering problem. I take too many pictures, which ones are good? So as you all adopt technology, AI, the problem space is going to shift. You have to keep that in mind. And at Bank of America, the way we think about intelligent automation is that knowledge workers spend way too much time on manual processing and less time on the more value-added side to things. So we've built an automation system that actually replaces the manual processing. And this frees up people's time to do some of the more smarter work. And that's kind of the journey that my team and me were on. So if you think about what an average knowledge worker does, they get information, they perform logic, and they reach a conclusion. So we've built a system that does exactly that. Our system gathers information, our system performs the logic that humans perform today, and our system reaches the conclusion. And what this allows us to do is, it actually allows the machine to do the heavy lifting. And we can actually detect anomalies at a much faster clip. The example we use is a branch in Miami suddenly is opening up more accounts than it typically does. So we detected an anomaly, let's go investigate it. Maybe they were running a marketing campaign, and maybe it was all legitimate, and maybe it wasn't. But letting the machine detect these anomalies that humans can't because of the number of records, right? We can actually move up the value chain. And the other thing is that we don't look at automation from a singularity perspective. We don't think it's just automation. We're connecting the dots and we're looking at it from a full-fledged platform perspective. So we're connecting it to dashboards where information is going to be readily available to people. We're connecting it to workflow. So if you think about the FedEx model, you know exactly where your package is. So for the tasks that we automate, we want to understand where the automation is, where it's stuck, where it's moving, what's the manual aspect. And then it's also kind of connected to alerts and notification. Just like Instagram and LinkedIn, when you wake up in the morning, you get alerts and notifications. It guides you. The same thing with our automation system. Hey, the automation task ran last night, go look at it. The task failed, go look at it. And then it's connected, lastly, to search. It's a Google-like search capability that empowers users themselves to go search for information. And what this allows us to do is analogous to, in the world of driverless cars, the job of an Uber driver is going to shift from behind a wheel to behind a computer screen. So this control room setting is what we're aspiring to kind of get to. So if you think about our various business units, from consumer banking, wealth management, investment banking, trading, our CFO organization, and our back office, what we're trying to do with the automation work is basically connecting the dots and enabling all of these control points to kind of talk to each other that don't talk to each other. So now, let's go back to economics. How do you want to think about AI? It's a very technical subject. But what AI basically does is it brings the cost of prediction down. If you think about a doctor, in the first 10 years of their practice, they typically see 10,000 patients. And they get better and better at evaluating subsequent patients. What does AI do? It takes millions of patient records, and it can help predict what ails you. So what's fueling the AI revolution? And that's where this analogy works. In other aspects, it doesn't work. But data is what's fueling this. So all those millions of records, that's how you can train the AI models. So this is where we spend a lot of time on the data lifecycle side to things. And it really starts with having a business understanding of the data. And from there, you can get into data discovery and sourcing. And from there, you do data governance. And this is something that's really important to us because it's directly connected to our firm's strategy of responsible growth. we're not going to move fast and we're not going to break things. So for us, basically, we are going to actually get approval to use the right sets of data from the right places. And then you actually can make the connections. And once you make the connections to data, then you can prepare it. And once you prepare it, that's when all the insights start coming out. And this is where a lot of the stuff that you've heard throughout the various sessions today, it starts with exploratory data analysis. And then you get into feature engineering, you get into training the models, and then you get into sharing and collaboration. And you repeat this over and over again, and you visualize along the way. And we do something called model risk. And again, it's tied to we're not moving fast, we're not going to break things. Our models are approved internally by independent parties. And they're validated month over month, year over year. And the other thing that we find fascinating, and again, it's tied to our firm's strategy of responsible growth, sometimes AI models can go off the rails, like the Microsoft model that became racist. So we really want to believe in responsible AI, and for that, light has to be shown into the AI box. And there's some fascinating research that's coming out of MIT that actually sheds light into how the AI is making those decisions. And if you connect all these dots around automation, what we see in front of us is the $7 trillion opportunity of automating non-productive knowledge work. So fundamentally, how do you take advantage of all of this? At the heart of it, it's an imagination problem. Could you have imagined 10 years ago that you're going to take your phone out of your pocket, hit a button, and a car is going to be waiting outside? So in your respective areas, what are you imagining? What are you thinking about? And so I'm going to talk about 5 ideas. If you can implement these 5 ideas, you can take advantage of this revolution. It starts with, in a big organization like ours, and I'm sure a lot of you are in big companies, the nervous system attacks when you're trying to innovate. There are people that are just set in the old way, and when you try to implement change, the nervous system attacks. So the key here is basically innovate on the outside. So what Match.com's CEO did here in New York, he cleared out a floor. He hired a bunch of brand new people, and he said, I want you to kill Match.com. And that group of people, you know what they came up with? They came up with Tinder. And when Match.com went public, 60% of Match.com's valuation was based on Tinder. So they were actually innovating themselves, or out-innovating themselves. So simply speaking, how can you be 10% different? How individually you're going to be 10% different, your group, your company. So when the competition comes, sure, they come for your tail because you're out-innovating yourself. Another angle to think about is you're having a massive transformational purpose, right? If you think about like the TED conferences, right? Ideas worth spreading. Google, organizing the world's information. Those are lofty aspirational goals that people can rally behind. And in the area that we're implementing the automation system is an area called process testing. And our lofty goal is test everything every day. And this is something that's near and dear to my heart. I drink the Agile Kool-Aid, and we'll talk more about this, where as product owners, keep it simple, keep it focused, avoid product drift. Figure out what your true north is, align it to the customer, and focus on that. And part of that focus is design thinking, right? Where you're iterating through a series of 4 steps, right? Discover, define, develop, deliver. Keep doing this over and over and over again, and you can experiment your way through product development. A/B testing along the way, customer feedback along the way. And then what's interesting is diffusion's minimal. A World Economic Forum talks about how only like 25 to 29% of knowledge worker tasks have been automated. And in the next 5 years, we'll just get to 40%. So there's a long way to go here. This isn't a 100-meter dash, right? And what's interesting is if you think about it from a platform perspective, right? Did the light bulb come first or the electricity grid? Did the plane come first or the airport? So you have to build the use case, and then the platform comes. And if you build a platform, that's when you really you can scale and you can get your flywheel to spin. And if you're looking to accelerate your data science journey, the idea is how can you leverage tools? And so internally at Bank of America, we have a stack called the Phoenix Stack, and we have a series of best-in-class tools that enable us to accelerate this journey. And it's fundamentally based off of Hadoop, but there's a series of other tools that we use. And here's another interesting angle, and that's one of collaboration. For those that are designers here, you'll be familiar with tools like Azure and Sketch, which were the standard tools. A year ago, another tool came out of nowhere called Figma. And Figma built collaboration right into the tool. So all the back and forth that designers go through, all of that was built into the tool itself. So if you think about email and chat, they're just papering over cracks in your process. So if you build collaboration into the tool set, then you're really allowing people to connect right there and then. And that's another aspect of the platform that we're thinking about. And what's interesting is this would have been heresy a few years ago, very much like a bank moving to the cloud, right? But it's opening up a lot, right? Brian Moynihan talked about cloud computing that Bank of America is doing. We had 70,000 servers. We're down to less than 10,000. We've got a private cloud. We've got a partnership with Microsoft Azure, right? So things have changed a lot. Goldman Sachs, opened up their proprietary trading platform. It's a page right out of Silicon Valley's book, right? So more and more of this is going to happen, and how do we, in terms of the platform we've built, how are we going to open it up internally within Bank of America? And then maybe that's the crawl walk phase to it, and I don't know if eventually where we go from there. But sure, the needle's going to move on that. And then another angle is people, right? Your true north should always be your customer. And sometimes, it's difficult, right? Where, who do you know your customer is? And really being focused on your customer and the experience that you offer them. How do you catalyze the crowd? We had a naming contest for a system we were building. Within the first day, we had like over 200 responses. It's crazy how people can get involved, but you have to be able to leverage it, and you can't do it on your own. So you might as well build a team around you. And the last thing is the power of diversity, right? And this is, not only diversity in terms of the traditional dimensions of, race and gender, but it's also background, right? Like you want to have, like in a bank like ours, we have people from startups joining us. And they bring a completely new way of thinking. And in the business we're in, the people we're bringing in have no domain expertise in that business. So it's completely fresh thinking. And so that's the power of diversity. And you think about research year over year for all the techies here, right? And all maybe the men who don't have hair in terms of the tough projects, right? Just so many projects fail. So many projects are delayed. And that's where you think about agile, right? Where you basically bite off what you can chew, ship the product, shipping is a feature too, right? And then you get the feedback and you iterate off of that. And that's the way we approach things at Bank of America. And then here's a provocative thought, right? Agile's dead. With your technology teams, if you can cover this much ground, if you're able to empower the business users, can you cover? And more, if you think about solutions like Tableau, like Trifecta, and you think about other solutions that are on their way, like OutSystems, like Uncork, these are low-code, no-code environments where business users, savvy business users, can actually implement technology. And you actually get rid of the technology business contract game, where the business is complaining about technology, technology is complaining about business. If techies just enable a platform, the business controls their own destiny. If they make a product and it sucks, it's on them. If they make a product that's great, that's on them too. And so those solutions are, almost there, and they're going to mature over the next few years in terms of these no-code platforms. And it's going to be a great way to expand your, technology scope. So you put all of this together, it's parallelism, right? Innovate from the outside, don't innovate from the within. Otherwise, the nervous system will eat you. And then think about purpose, having a massive transformative purpose. Think about building a platform, but first build one use case and build towards that platform. And then think about people, right? The customer experience, diversity. And then lastly, what we just talked about was enabling and empowering the actual business users. And just one last thing. So if you think about humans and how we think in a very sequential, logical way, right? Year over year, experts were asked about their forecast of solar projection. And year after year, experts basically answered in a very, very linear way. And it's fascinating that you can see this over 5 years, 10 years. They answered in exactly the same way linearly. But in actuality, the production was happening exponentially. So you think about like all the disruptions that's happening around us. Maybe it hasn't impacted the banks as much for reasons that I could spend a completely different session on. When the speed happens, it will happen really, really fast. So keep that in mind. And this is a simple example, right? This is a trading floor from one of our competitor banks up in Stamford, 2008. 10 years later, or actually less than 10 years later, all gone. That's how fast things move, right? Again, software eating the world. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.